What's good, YouTube? This is the only Big Green Yu-Gi-Oh, and I'm back again with another deck profile. This deck profile is going to be of Troop Dupe Scoop format. The specific time frame would be June 1st, 2007, up until the September 1st ban list came out in 2007. And this deck is going to be of DDT, which stood for Diamond Dude Turbo. It's one of my favorite, actually it is my favorite deck of the format. I mentioned that in my Baboon Burn deck profile, how Baboon Burn was my second favorite deck of the format, just below this one here. I absolutely love this deck, and it was actually the best deck in the format prior to Troop Dupe. In the previous format, it was known as Airblade Turbo, which I know some of you guys might have heard that deck name before. It's one of the most popular Yu-Gi-Oh decks in history. It had triple Stratos, it had triple Magical Stone Excavation, it had triple Dimension Fusion, and the deck was just absolutely crazy. It was super consistent at pulling off OTKs and stuff like that. Of course, going into this format, they hit the deck pretty hard. All those cards that I mentioned basically just got limited. But that still didn't kill the deck. The deck still won a SJC in this format. Absolutely crazy. So it still was topping, and it even won an event. So it definitely, didn't completely kill the deck. Nowadays, if you hit a deck like that hard, their three best cards going all to one or, banned or something, nowadays that basically just kills the deck completely, where this deck just fought through it and still won their SJC, or one of them. Starting off, the one of Elemental Hero Stratos. Stratos, you mainly just use him to get to that Diamond Dude. If you have a Destiny draw, you could use him to get the Mally, and then of course your last option would be that Dasher, but mainly Diamond Dude is going to be your first option. And the Spell and Trap Destruction effect doesn't really come up because you can easily get Ryu Shinshi out of the extra deck that basically deals with traps and stuff. Of course, you can turbo out the Jinzo with stuff like Reasoning and Monster Gate. And of course, there's Heavy Storm, so that effect doesn't really come up. You're mainly just using his Search effect. And then speaking of the boy himself, Triple Diamond Dude, the best card in the deck other than arguably D-Mock, Phoenix Blade, and Dimension Fusion. This guy basically lets you excavate the top card of your deck. If it's a normal spell, it goes to the grave, and you can activate it at any time during your next turn's main phases, which is absolutely crazy. And the ruling on his effect actually, and it still is this way today, I'm pretty sure, if you or if you excavate a spell like a Destiny Draw, or Monster Gate or Confiscation, you do not have to pay the cost on that card. You don't have to discard for Destiny Draw, you just draw two. Confiscation, you don't pay life. Monster Gate, you don't offer a monster up for tribute for its effect. It's absolutely insane that that you can do that off of him, which is crazy. It turns things into Pot of Greed and even better than stuff like that. So he's super crazy. The one of Destiny Hero Dasher. Dasher is basically just here to have another monster to put on the board for some presence because this deck doesn't really play a whole lot of monsters. So you definitely need, a bigger monster because Jinzo and D-Mock are the only other two super big monsters in the deck. And what's crazy is the guy that won the SJC in this format didn't play Dasher in his main deck, which I find very weird. I feel like Dasher is definitely needed in the main deck. I think he might have been siding one or two Dashers, but I don't quote me on that, but I think he might have been. But I still think Dasher is definitely a main board card. You have to main this guy. You can pump him up to a 3,100 attack point monster by tributing off, or not tributing off, but sending to grave a monster, which basically Mally can just fuel that effect. The only downside about him is after he attacks, he goes to defense position. He also has a revive effect once per duel, where if you draw into your monster during a draw phase, you can reveal it and then just reborn this guy out of the grave. And then speaking of Triple Mally was very important in this deck. He was important in a lot of decks in this format, but I would argue this deck is probably the most important he was in. He fuels your metamorphoses. He fuels your tributes for stuff like D-Mock, Jinzo, and even the Dasher himself. He fuels the attack for Dasher to boost his attack and things. You can even use him as a wall to buy you, buy you a next turn. He's just absolutely amazing in this deck. The only downside about him is when you get the Mally curse. If you guys don't know what that is, it's when you open up Triple Mally, which yes, that happens, and it's absolutely annoying. It's rare to happen, but it happens. It sucks when it does. But other than that, you can't complain about Mally. He's just absolutely insane. And then speaking of Dark Magician of Chaos. This is the best monster in the deck other than a Diamond Dude, and arguably the best card in the deck other than Diamond Dude. He just basically lets you loop your Dimension Fusion and stuff like that. He lets you get back crazy spells like Heavy Storm, Lightning Vortexes if you need to clear the board, things like that. Another crazy thing is whenever he destroys an opponent's monster by battle, it banishes it instead of sends it to the grave, so Card Trooper doesn't get its effect off to draw when he destroys one. The floating monsters of this format don't get their effects, like Giant Rat, Pyramid Turtle, Mystic Tomato. Sangan doesn't get his search and stuff, so that's a crazy thing. And then whenever he leaves the field, he basically gets banished, which is not bad at all because the deck plays Dimension Fusion. You just can bring him right back out and then add it back to hand with his effect, so it doesn't matter at all. Jinzo, of course, I mentioned him earlier as well. He's just there to deal with the traps and stuff, like Mirror Force or TT that can basically just end the game if you basically get your board off into one of those cards. And Jinzo's just there to just basically be like, no, you're not going to beat me, I'm going to beat you. And other than that, yeah, there's really like no explanation for him. The one of Exiled Force, this is just dealing for monsters you can't deal with or get over with by battle and stuff like that. Like if you don't have your Demock out, but the opponent has like a Demock or something, just there to deal with something like that. If you have a Jinzo and they've got like a Monarch and you don't want to kamikaze the Jinzo into the Monarch, you can just bring that guy and do that in other ways like that. And then the last monster in the deck, the one-of Card Trooper. Normally, every deck in this format plays 3 Card Trooper or none at all. This deck only plays 1 because you really don't need the 3 Card Trooper. What Card Trooper does, if you guys don't know, in Troop Dupe Scoop format, what the best card doesn't do, it lets you mill 3 cards, and it gains 500 attack for each card milled. It basically becomes a 19k beater until the end of the turn, and whenever it's destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you get to draw a card. But since you're playing Demock, you don't have to worry about the opponent's Card Troopers because they're not going to be getting their draws. Onto the crazy spell. I think I run like 26 spells in this deck. The 2 Reinforcement of the Army. This is just to search out your Stratos. If you've already got your Stratos, then that Diamond Dude, or it can get you to your Exiled Force if there's a monster that you can't really deal with. The triple Destiny Draw, which is basically a Pot of Greed if you hit it off of Diamond Dude's effect. And of course, this just gets that Mally in the graveyard. It gets the Dasher in the grave too, so you can start activating their effects and stuff. Arguably the best spell card in the deck other than Dimension Fusion and the Blade, Monster Gate, which of course you're playing 3 of. You contribute a monster from your side of the field or offer a monster from your side of the field, send it to the grave, and then you basically just keep milling cards until you get to a monster that can be normal summon, and then you summon that monster. And that's what I'm talking about by if you can hit a Jinzo or a Demock off of this effect, you've pretty much got game because you've milled half your deck at that point, and you can get back any spell card you want with Demock or a Jinzo. They're not going to be able to TT or Mirror Force you or anything. Jinzo locks that up. So you're definitely going to be in a good situation. Triple Reasoning. Reasoning, your opponent gets to declare a level, and it's like a lesser form of, or a less powerful form of Monster Gate. You basically keep excavating the top cards of your deck until you get to a monster that can be normal summon. If your opponent declared the level right, so if they declare a level 4 and you end up hitting the Diamond Dude, everything just goes to the graveyard. If they declare wrong, they declare a 4 and you end up hitting the Demock special summons itself, and then you get to add back a spell card and stuff like that. Of course, the rest of the stuff goes to the grave too. Onto the one of MSE, Magical Stone Excavation, and then the Reproduction. You play just 1 Reproduction just because how Magical Stone, how I was mentioning, it got hit to 1 and limited to 1, which does suck in this format because it was the best deck when this card was at 3 in the previous format. But yeah, this is basically just a not as good form as this, so that's why you play this. The triple Lightning Vortexes. A Dark Hole was banned in this format along with Raigeki, so this was basically your only form of like mass monster removal that isn't like a trap card. You get to discard a card, so that actually isn't that bad at all because you get that Mally in the grave to destroy all face-up attack position monsters, and you can like get the Dasher in the graveyard and stuff like that too with its effect. So the discard doesn't really hurt you at all. It doesn't even really matter in this deck because you have a bunch of stuff that you're willing to discard anyways. The 1 card destruction is just for helping unbricking your hand and getting, like I say, the Dasher in the grave, the Demok, not Demok, well, Demok wouldn't be that bad in the grave if you've got pre-mat in your hand, but getting Mally into the grave and stuff like that. The 1 of meta, it's basically a free Ryu Senshi when you have the Mally in the grave. That's basically like it. The 1 of Heavy Storm is just for dealing with the spell and traps, especially if you got this in your hand and you're about to go off with like a Dimension Fusion, you can just lay that down. The power 4, I'm not playing Pot of Avarice, so I guess technically it would be the power 3. Pot of Avarice is not needed in this deck at all because you literally only play like 10 to 11 monsters, something like that. I don't even know how much I play, but it's like around 10 or 11 monsters that you play. So Pot of Avarice is basically probably never going to ever go off, especially when you're banishing most of your stuff. But yeah, this is just for taking opponent's monsters, pushing in for game, or you could take it and tribute over with something. Pre-mat is broken with Demok because you basically just start going off. And Confiscation is broken if you can hit with Diamond Dude's effect because you don't have to pay the 1,000 life. You just get to look at your opponent's hand and discard something for free. The best 2 spell cards in the deck, other than Monster Gate, of course. The triple Divine Sword Phoenix Blade, and then Dimension Fusion. Of course, this got hit 1 from previous format. Previous format, this card was at 3. And Divine Sword is absolutely insane. I don't know why they didn't hit this card going into Troop Dupe Scoop. This card is the reason the deck is still able to play in Troop Dupe Scoop format, because whenever it's in the graveyard, you can banish up to 2 warrior monsters and then add it back to your hand. And then it gives 300 attack to one of your warrior monsters. And it's crazy because you just banish all the warrior monsters you've been fueling into your graveyard, and then you can just activate Defusion and bring them all back and then beef them up with this card. Like, I don't know how come they didn't hit this card to 1 or ban this card going in to Troop Dupe Scoop format. I feel like this would have been a crazy hit too on the deck. And then Dimension Fusion, of course, is you can loop Demok with and stuff like that. You pay the 2k and special summon as many banished monsters that you have. And then the final 2 cards in the deck, the 2 trap cards, the 1 of Threatening Roar, the 1 of Mirror Force. Threatening Roar actually wasn't played in the original builds, but once people realized that the deck is prone to bricking and stuff, you've got to have something to let you last through a few more turns. And that's where a lot of people started playing 2 and 3 Threatening Roar. My build only plays 1 Threatening Roar though, but most of the builds play 2 to 3 Threatening Roar. And then of course all the builds played Mirror Force. You could probably take a Torrential Tribute in here if you want to. None of the builds really played Torrential Tribute, but I think Torrential Tribute would be a cool tech if you wanted to play that in there. Of course, just don't activate it when you've got some crazy stuff on the field. But yeah, just the main 2 traps that you'd play. There is a fusion deck, but Ryu Senshi is the only really guy that you go into, like right here, him there. Oops, you guys can barely see it. I guess Gatling Dragon you can go into with like the Demok, but it doesn't really matter. But yeah, Ryu Senshi is the important one in the fusion deck, especially for this deck here. Oops, I dropped it. My bad, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will be having more of this.